Hi everyone, it's Katrina.
Number 10. Giant killer dinosaur. The Meraxes gigas was quite similar to the Tyrannosaurus rex in that it was a huge meat-eating dinosaur with tiny arms. This terrifying new creature was discovered by paleontologists just recently in the northern Patagonian region of Argentina. The skull of the new dinosaur was first unearthed in 2012, and since then, many more of its bones have been excavated. It's an entirely new species, a creature with laughable forelimbs that scientists say gave the apex predator a survival advantage. While we may mock these kinds of dinosaurs for having stubby little arms, they weren't totally useless. This particular dinosaur weighed a whopping 4 tons, but may have even grown larger. It was near the top of the food chain between 90 million and 100 million years ago in what is now Argentina. It was a type of Carcharodontosaurid, meaning it belonged to a family of carnivorous theropods, dinosaurs that walked on 2 legs. It was also at the peak of evolution of such dinosaurs. What I mean by peak evolution is that this was the best rendition of the theropod carnivore. It had reached such a high level of development that scientists believe it had facial ornamentation linked to social signaling. In other words, it was starting to develop facial expressions and characteristics quite similar to our own. As for its short forelimbs, those were used for mating activities. Scientists aren't sure how, but they definitely had something to do with attracting partners. Number 9. Therizinosaurus. By far the most terrifying prehistoric beast might have been the Therizinosaurus. This creature stands out from all others because of its size and savage ferocity. It had claws on the ends of its fingers that made it the Edward Scissorhands of the prehistoric world. These things were so long that it could have cut a person into 3 pieces with one swipe. It also only had 3 fingers, with its extraordinarily long claws extending from each one like nightmare manicured nails. So how long were these deadly finger swords? Scientists say the claws were at least 3 feet long each, maybe even longer. That's about the length of an ordinary person's leg. And these things were sharp and unstoppable. Plus, the Therizinosaurus stood an estimated 30 feet tall, over 3 times taller than a human. But even though this thing had samurai swords at the ends of its hands, it wasn't a carnivore. It was an herbivore, although scientists don't know for sure 100%. They believe it used its deadly weapons for reaching into the trees and pulling down vegetation. It was almost like an overgrown sloth. So far, the only known location of the Therizinosaurus is Mongolia. It lived in the Gobi Desert about 70 million years ago. Number 8. Beelzebufo. In modern times, the only frogs people need to be afraid of are the ones that excrete poison through their skin, like the tiny, colorful ones found in places like the Amazon jungle. But between 65 and 70 million years ago on the island of Madagascar, there was a creature known as the devil frog that would have been positively horrifying. It lived during the late Cretaceous period and was most likely the largest frog that ever lived. According to National Geographic, the Beelzebufo was the size of a beach ball, weighing about 10 pounds and growing to be 16 inches long. That doesn't seem like much, but this frog was roughly the size of a small dog. And here's another thing that makes the Beelzebufo such a terrifying creature. Unlike its docile living relatives, the devil frog was mean and aggressive. Scientists say it was an ambush predator that would have attacked anything that got too close. It would have snatched lizards, small vertebrates, and even newly born dinosaurs. This frog had an incredibly powerful set of jaws, along with a massive mouth. It had all the tools it needed to crunch dinosaur bones and swallow small hatchlings. One thing that still baffles scientists is that the only living relatives of the Beelzebufo are found far from Madagascar in South America. Scientists don't understand how the descendants of the greatest frog that ever lived migrated so far across seemingly open water. They believe there must have been a land bridge between Africa and Antarctica about 65 million years ago. Number 7. The super piranha. The modern red-bellied piranha can grow to about 20 inches in length. That's just shy of 2 feet. But the Megapiranha paranensis, which lived between 6 and 10 million years ago at the same time as the megalodon, grew to be even bigger. Researchers believe it was nearly 30 inches long and weighed roughly 30 pounds. It had incredible zigzag teeth that it used to slice flesh like a mouthful of razor blades. It also had one of the most incredible bite forces of any fish throughout the planet's history. The bite force of a Tyrannosaurus rex was roughly 3,000 pounds. Nobody knows for sure, but that's a solid estimate. The Megapiranha had a bite force of 1,000 pounds. To put that into perspective, the Megapiranha was about 100 times smaller than the T-Rex, yet it had an almost comparable bite force. The Megapiranha's unforgiving chompers would have meant certain mutilation to anything unfortunate enough to get stuck between them. If that meant your arm, it was coming right off. Lucky for us, this creature went extinct a long time ago. It had made its home in the rivers and waterways of South America, where its modern relatives still live, terrorizing unsuspecting swimmers and biting their fingers off. Just kidding. Only sometimes. And now for number 6. But first, wanted to give a big shout out to Sarah Booth and the Sausage Continuum. Thanks so much for watching this channel and spending time with us. If you are new here, welcome, and be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Number 6. Baryonyx. The Baryonyx was a truly frightening carnivore. It also had a similar body to the T-Rex, meaning it was large and plodded around on 2 legs. But it was less of a lizard with long legs and more of a reptile mixed with a heron. The Baryonyx was an expert fisherman that grew to be over 30 feet long. It had extremely sharp and finely serrated teeth that were great for ripping apart the flesh of fish. It also had a spectacularly long neck and a mouth shaped just like a crocodile's mouth, which made it perfect for snatching prey out of the water. Unlike other carnivorous theropods during the age of the dinosaurs, the Baryonyx was a passive hunter. It didn't chase down food and terrorize other dinosaurs. It spent most of its time crouched at the edge of riverbanks or wading into the shallow water to catch fish. But just because the Baryonyx was a fisherman didn't mean it wasn't dangerous. This thing had claws that were like metal hooks. It could cut and disembowel, and its arms were actually long enough to do something with, unlike the T-Rex. It was also a scavenger and would have chased lesser animals away from their kills and stolen their food. Number 5. Dreadnoughtus. The Dreadnoughtus is an extinct genus of sauropod, a truly gargantuan herbivore that had a neck 37 feet long. Sauropods were the biggest land animals that ever lived, defined by their large size, their preposterously long necks, and their 4 thick legs. They had really tiny heads, and their legs were like concrete pillars to support their immense weight. Then at their backs, they had extremely long tails like whips. Recently, researchers even discovered that sauropods had soft, padded feet to help them carry all that bulk. The Dreadnoughtus was not the biggest sauropod of them all, but it was a hefty monster. It had a length of at least 85 feet and weighed 65 tons. Only 2 fossils have been found, both in 2014 in southern Patagonia. The fossils date back 77 million years. The Dreadnoughtus was technically a kind of titanosaur, closely related to the Argentinosaurus, the largest dinosaur that ever existed, and the Saltasaurus. Scientists have speculated that because of their long necks, they wouldn't have needed to move very much. They would have walked no more than a few feet, then stood around all day munching on vegetation. If anything unpleasant got near them, they would use their tail to slap it away. Number 4. The Jaekelopterus. The Jaekelopterus was the largest known eurypterid that ever lived. Eurypterids were armed predators of the ocean that looked like sea scorpions, and they evolved about 467 million years ago and continued to thrive until 248 million years ago. That was an extremely long time before the first dinosaur hatched, or before the first dinosaur laid an egg, whichever came first. Eurypterids are particularly fascinating because they were bigger than anything you could imagine. Picture a scorpion, only much larger, and swimming through the water to get you. That's how terrifying these things were. They lived at a time when the oceans were brimming with life. With their impenetrable armor, their snapping claws, and their many legs, they were able to effectively prey on just about anything. Some eurypterids were quite small, no larger than the size of a child. But the Jaekelopterus was gigantic, with an unbelievable length of roughly 10 feet. It grew to shocking proportions, which may have been unmatched by any other arthropod to this day. These were animals like beetles and spiders, as Eurypterids were some of the first arthropods to evolve. The Jaekelopterus didn't live in the ocean, but lurked in fresh water like lakes and rivers, hunting fish and maybe even its own kind. Number 3. The giant stork. In prehistoric Indonesia, about 50,000 years ago, there was a giant carnivorous stork. This was not like the stork you heard of as a child, the happy bird that brings babies to people through their windows. This was a stork that would have preyed on human babies. While ancient hominins competed for food on the tropical island in Indonesia, they had to deal with the gigantic birds not only stealing their food, but also trying to eat them. The bird is called Leptoptylos robustus, and it was at least 6 feet tall. If you've ever been down to the river and seen a heron standing in the water waiting for a fish to go by, the prehistoric stork was about 6 times larger than that. It lived in Indonesia during a particularly unique period. There were gigantic birds, huge elephant-like creatures called stegodon, and hobbits. Yes, hobbits. There was an ancient race of human ancestors called Homo floresiensis, who stood only about 3 feet tall. They were tiny, and scientists say resembled the hobbits from The Lord of the Rings more than ordinary people today. Because of their small stature, you can see why the ancient hominins had such a difficult time competing with 6-foot birds. One of the scientists who studied the new stork fossils, Dr. Hanneke Meyer, said that because the gigantic stork could fly, it would have been a direct competitor with early hominins. Number 2. The mosasaur. The mosasaur lived 80 million years ago and was one of the most ferocious beasts that ever roamed the world's oceans. In 2022, the skeleton of a mosasaur was found 80 miles from Dallas. Dr. Ron Tchaikovsky from the Perot Museum of Nature and Science helped direct the dig to retrieve this animal's bones, a 30-foot sea monster that was kind of like a mix between a crocodile and the Loch Ness Monster. It was an extremely massive marine reptile that grew to be the top predator in the ocean following the extinction of the ichthyosaurs and the pliosaurs. Then, when the asteroid struck our planet 66 million years ago, the mosasaur went extinct with the rest of the dinosaurs. Animals like sharks and crocodiles survived, but the mosasaur didn't make the cut. One of the interesting things about the mosasaur is just how diverse its family was. The smallest of them all was the Dallasaurus turneri, which grew to be less than 3.5 feet long, while the biggest of them all, the Mosasaurus hoffmanni, could grow to be over 56 feet long. As of right now, the largest Mosasaurus skeleton on display can be found at the Canadian Fossil Discovery Centre in Manitoba. The specimen's name is Bruce, and it's 43 feet long. The mosasaur was a weird mix between a whale and a lizard. That's honestly the best way to describe it. The creature had a body shaped kind of like a monitor lizard, except streamlined for swimming. They also had paddles which evolved by spreading web-like flesh between their long finger and toe bones. It's a perfect example of how lizards slowly evolved into the most terrifying predators of the ocean. Number 1. Allosaurus. The Allosaurus was almost like the baby brother of the T-Rex. It was one of the first dinosaurs ever discovered. Its fossils have been dug up from all over the world, and it was just as prevalent on land as the Megalodon was at sea. It was a gigantic bipedal carnivore with small arms, a big head, and deadly teeth. The Allosaurus lived from sometime around 155 million years ago until 150 million years ago. It was a Jurassic dinosaur and was particularly numerous in what is now Utah. At the Cleveland Lloyd Quarry, which boasts the densest concentration of Jurassic bones on the planet, 46 out of 74 of the dinosaurs identified were allosaurs. This shows just how prolific they really were. Plus, they have been found all over the place, from Portugal to Siberia and even in Tanzania in Africa. There were many different species of Allosaurus, at least 8. Scientists say the largest of these species could almost rival the T-Rex. A 1976 analysis of one of their skeletons in the Utah Geological Survey Bulletin estimated the biggest Allosaurus could grow to an estimated 43 feet long and 16 feet tall. Another interesting fact is that the Allosaurus had a pretty long lifespan. Adults could probably live up to at least 28 years. While that wasn't the oldest an animal could be at the time, it was still a pretty long life for a gigantic lizard. Thanks for watching! Which of these prehistoric beasts would be the most terrifying to see in real life? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. See you soon. Bye!